Hello, welcome to Garden Chronicles. My name is James David, and in today's video, I would like to talk about succulents, and these particular ones are very much suitable for the tropical climate zone around my region. And these particular ones are very much the cascading type, which I really liked and enjoyed them very much because of these cascading features. In this particular video, I'm actually very much focused on this particular species, commonly known as Huernia schneideriana, which is also identified as red dragon. Now, basically here I'll be talking more on the cultivation characteristics and behavior and all my experience. I guess roughly about plus minus about 5 to 10 years growing this particular plant, and I like to share that ideas and some of the tips and cares and all those information here in this particular video, and I really hope that you enjoy that. And of course, I must also say that you would have actually come across many videos on succulents, and of course the idea here, even I even think about it, that if you grow one, it is almost the same with every other succulents, but this particular one is a little bit unique, and I like to share that growing planting journey here in this particular video. So I hope you enjoy it and sit back and enjoy this particular video. Now, my tip number one is growing cascading succulents. Like if you were to have something like a hanging basket, like what I do over here, I would really recommend that you plant them in such a way that they cascade downwards. In this way, you can actually enjoy the features where they form like a serpentine kind of a features, something like what you would like to see in a way to say that it is cascading downwards, and that kind of growth, something like a reflection, like how you would see it like a Medusa hair kind of features. Sometimes you can even actually grow it in a very featured like a facial kind of a pottery, and you can actually plant this and it will just form that kind of a hair like kind of features. So my tip number one on this is that grow these particular types of plant for that features, because not every succulent has this kind of effect, but particularly this particular Huernia species, they tend to have these features. And so if you were to have looking in the factor of landscaping on a factor of garden features, this will be the perfect one. Now, my tip number two is plant care, which I find is very important because here in my place is actually a tropical region area where it rains a lot, and sometimes there can be a season where about 3 to 6 months where it rains daily, and there are time a season where it is a hot blazing sun, and the humidity factor could be a kind of a challenge where it can be very hot and dry, which could be good for many succulents. Now, the factor here is that because of the element where weather is not constant, like if you were to mention or you were to observe in the desert regions or arid regions, the rainfall there may be just like once or twice in a year. Here it's very, very complicated in a way to say that it is not stable. So if it's receiving too much sunlight and there is no rain, of course, as a gardener, I can actually focus on watering these plants maybe like once a week. But let's say if this is exposed to rain almost on a daily basis, this is definitely going to succumb to a rotting problem. So my tip number two on this, on plant care, is to place them such a way that they receive very good bright indirect sunlight and at the same time shaded from rainfall, or at least heavy rainfall. They can actually tolerate a little bit of a splatter of rainwater or even these droplets on their stem. They can able to handle that, but too much waterlogged potting medium can cause this plant to rot. And the worst case scenario here is that you will not able to notice the rotting that takes place at the root board, because once root rot takes place, the plant is going to go through a major stress and it might perish. Now, my next tip is very much to do with potting media. I believe each gardener has their own different mix, but over here I basically use a very simple and basic type. And one of the main factors that I'm actually focusing on is that I need to identify and see that once after watering, the potting media does dry out very fast. And this is one of the things that I want to make mention and show to you, is that this is how I check that even after I water it, say in 1 day's time, on the next day it should be something like this. And this is actually helps the root ball not to get rotten. That is the main factor of it, is to have a fast draining medium. Here in this video, I'm actually taking the opportunity to propagate all these newly grown stems that's coming out from the main vine, and I'm actually just poking it back so that I have more bushier and more crowded space, or a little bit more of all this filling up this particular pot. Now you must be wondering, why is the white sponge over there? Actually, basically the first factor here is that it was actually a drainage material at the bottom, but somehow over time, I'm not really sure what actually has happened. The whole potting media sort of like turned over, and the supposed potting media went down and this thing surfaced back. So I just left it like that. In a way, it aids fast draining factor after watering, because it acts as a wicking system where it sort of like dries out the whole medium in this potting media. Maybe it may not work on your side. Perhaps again, as I said, that different gardeners use different kind of potting medium. I've noticed that a lot of chunky materials, something like plumies and charcoal and lacquer balls. In my case, I just want to use sort of like a semi soil based kind of a potting medium, and actually it works best for me. And of course, again, I must want to mention to you that a lot of experimental factors that need to be done by each gardener based on their garden condition. Here you can actually see that I'm carefully twisting the segment off from the stem, and they're actually easily detachable. So these are the things that actually appears in nature, in their natural environment, where something knocks them off and they actually propagate. Self-propagation takes place naturally in the wild, or in their native environment. So this is the thing that I will do, because if I don't do this, what's going to happen over time is that they do get knocked off by strong wind, and I may not able to see where the species has fallen, and they may just rot due to heavy rain downfall. So basically, I just carefully take these things out, and I just poke it with a chopstick, and I just plant it back, and I think they are good to go for propagation, very fast and easy in this kind of style. My next tip is going to come to the element of plant identification. Of course, if you notice that many succulents do have very much similar characteristics in their shapes and form, and one of the main way, or the first best identification, is by the inflorescence features, and especially this particular one. If you were to look at it, it has more of a pinkish color tones for its flowers. And as far as record shows, this is identified commonly as red dragon hybrid. The actual original actually has very much the ruby bright inflorescent red, but this one is very much on a toned down pinkish color. Hence, I've not actually fully able to identify this particular ID for this particular one. And the closest that I actually got through is the element of where it is actually identified as a hybrid. Coming to tip number 6, one of the factors that I want to mention here is that this particular plant is known as Lifesaver plant. Now, I was actually wondering, why is Lifesaver plant? Perhaps maybe it's because in the desert or arid areas where you might even have dangerous animals, something like scorpions or snakes, or maybe if at all they tend to attack you, and perhaps if you were to find this plant and you might squeeze their juice and apply on this affected areas, there could be that lifesaver. Maybe that's what I thought, but it's not. The element here is that Lifesaver is the name of a candy that appears to be like a float, the one that you see in the sea, the sea, and in the boat when they have this ones that tied along the raft, and so it appears to be more like a donut shape kind of stuff, and that float appears to be like what you see like a knob on the flower. Hence the name is identified based on that features, nothing to do with any special liquid or something of that element. It's not something like aloe vera, and not something like any of those antidotes or medicinal plant. It is just the features of the flowers. So do take note of that, because take it for a granted an idea thinking that it's actually a lifesaver. No, it's not. It's just the features of the flowers. So please do take note of that. My next tip is how to introduce this succulents to flower. Normally what I use is orchid foliar fertilizer. I normally spray on the stem once a week, and I think within 2 weeks time they will actually sprout out a kind of inflorescent buds that appears to be coming out from the side of the stem. It is definitely not uniform because it can just come out in appearance in anywhere. And one of the things that I've noticed here is that once they do come a lot, it does have a very nice beautiful show of flowers. Coming back to my next tip is that this particular plant, in a way I can mention that it is quite sensitive because it's very much segmented. These particular segments can easily be knocked off. You can notice over here, like suddenly I've been finding these pieces over here, and in most cases I may have forgotten to check and these pieces be lying down on the floor. Now, one of the things that I want to mention here is that when it comes to nature, these are actually loosely attached on the plant, and when, let's say, it rains or if at all the strong wind or something like that, they do get knocked off and they will sort of like fall into another new territory, and this element is actually very good for their propagation. So this is what I want to mention, is that to keep note of it. If at all that this happens, you can actually just place it lightly on top of a potting media, and the roots will actually develop along the stem, and this is how I actually propagate them. And another element here is, of course, I just, like what I showed earlier, is take a chopstick and just poke and just plant it. But let's say if you are not able to do so in time, you can actually collect it and just keep it aside first, like over here. And this is what you can actually notice. All the root balls, if you can see, the roots have actually appeared along the stem, and they do not actually form at the base of the stem, rather along the stem side. So these are things that you have to notice when it comes to this particular species of succulent plant. Coming to my next tip, I would like to share a little bit of a creativity here, is that to do a mix match on different types of plants together with the succulent. I do find that many gardeners in a way to like to just grow one type of succulent in one singular pot and they just go on very uniformly. I find that a little bit boring, and I'd like to play a creativity on that, and I do find that mixing and matching with different types of succulent, even orchids together with bromeliads, or also even anthuriums, and some of these, when it appears to be more on a cascading features element, they sort of like add value or create more of a features factors on it. But again, it appears in the factor of individual tastes and more on their own way of how they want to do a gardening. And this is how I do gardening, in a sense that because of lack of space and the element where there is just tight for space, I find that it's just a total waste just to grow one particular plant in one singular pot where there's a lot of space available. And somehow I find that this is very much like a filler plant, and they do not really take much of space, and I find that just placing them any nook, crook and corner, somehow just like nature has its best, this appears to does very well in this kind of condition, and in a way to say, like giving that kind of cascading effect together with different types of plants. Hey, if you're still with me until this particular video, I really appreciate if you can just click like in this particular video, and I would really appreciate it, as this will help my videos in the YouTube algorithm to reach out to many other subscribers and many other people who like to grow this particular plant. Also, if possible, I would really like if you can click subscribe, and I would promise you that if you have any questions regarding this particular plant, I'll give my utmost attention to help you through personally in context of growing this particular plant, and that will be my dedication, as I would like to grow your garden in this plant journey. And finally, I'm coming to my tip number 10 on how to handle a rotting problem or on the factor where the succulent is actually facing rot problems. And this is how I handle it. If you can notice over here, the element where the succulent is actually just lightly hanging by the dried portion of it. There are some places where it appears to be rotten, and I just want to make an emphasis of how I handle it. In most cases, what I'll do, I'll just take out the whole thing out, and I will just inspect it and see how are they behaving. If the whole stem is actually rotten, then I will consider it as the whole part is actually perished. But there are some salvageable parts where, especially even, yeah, they are actually appearing more on a green colorization. There also, you have to pay attention that if they have shriveled a lot, the chances are they are not actually receiving nutrients from the roots, and that is too also a danger sign where this particular plant is actually dying. So it will be good to check time to time to see whether they are pulp and healthy or they are actually shriveling. So if this shriveling, do take down the pot or just check through carefully to see that there is no damage taken place. As you can notice over here, the plant has gone in a survival mode where you can actually notice a lot of roots have already sprouted out from the stem. This is one of the nature's way of how the plant handle it, where it goes into the situation where it is still striving to survive. Also, if you notice over here, this particular portion of the stem, the whole thing has actually rotten. Now basically what has taken place is that I have not able to notice it, where this particular part or this portion is actually rolled around the pot. So the whole thing is slowly rotting away. So one of the factors that I want to mention here is that do check time to time to see that nothing is actually damaged or dying. So one of the telltale sign that this plant is dying is the shrivel factor. So over here, you notice there's also another thing that roots seems to be appearing from the stem, but they are not really strong visible roots. So this may also require to be repotted. Basically the remedy is very simple. Just cut off the affected parts where the rot has taken place and just repot it. So what I have done here is just I've trimmed off the whole thing off just to show to you where just slightly more, so that the element of the rot does not continue into the living stem. Another factor that need to take note of is to let the parts that has been trimmed off to dry up at least for a few days, that just to seal off the wound. If not, a new rot may take place and the whole piece of the stem can be perished. So when it comes to succulents, this is one of the factors that need to pay attention, because to be in the element of being patient and a factor of paying attention to this kind of small matters, because if not, this particular whole piece can perish. The next step is fairly easy. Just trim them according to a few inches and just place them into a potting media and let them do this nature's course, and basically they will grow. Within 2 to 3 months you can able to see new sprouts that's taking place. There are some instances where some of it may not survive, so do take note of that. If that takes place, it is part and parcel of propagation. Other than that, I find that this particular plant is quite resilient and hardy. They do succumb to sometimes to pest problems. Somehow I find that it is due to lack of proper strong lighting, and I find that if the plant suffers, somehow the pests do tend to attack on them, especially mealybugs and scale insect. But other than that, in most cases, this particular plant is quite resilient and strong. Here you can see I'm actually showcasing this particular succulent growing together with the Anthurium vivatifolium, and you can actually check that out in this particular video for this particular Anthurium and how I grow and care for them as a cascading plant. Now I've come to the end of my video. I hope you really enjoyed it, and if you have any comments, do put them in the comment below and I'll try my best to answer them according to my experience. Take care and have an enjoyable day. See you in my next video. Take care. Bye.